Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Naomi Hamilton is on the verge of a discovery that will send shockwaves through every corner of her life. She'd been digging into June's background for weeks now, propelled by a quiet but persistent feeling that something was off about the woman, this enigmatic figure living on the fringes of the community, always appearing at key moments yet hiding behind a curtain of mystery. Naomi couldn't explain the urgency she felt around June until the day she stumbled upon an old photo tucked into a dusty records box at the town library. The photo showed a much younger June standing beside two small children, her expression flat and distant. Naomi couldn't stop looking at the boy and girl in the picture. They looked eerily like Tyrell and Samantha. It wasn't confirmation, but it was enough to shake Naomi to her core. She took the photo home, scanned it into her laptop, and began cross-referencing it with every bit of information she had on June. Birth records. Adoption papers. Nothing was conclusive. Naomi felt like she was chasing shadows. But she couldn't let it go. Not until she had answers. Then came the unexpected twist. Regina arrived in town. Naomi hadn't known about June's sister. No one had. Regina was warm but reserved, carrying the weight of someone who'd stayed silent for too long. When Naomi introduced herself and explained why she was investigating June, Regina hesitated. She looked Naomi over with cautious eyes before deciding to speak. June has done a lot she regrets, Regina began slowly, voice trembling. But the worst thing she ever did, the thing that broke her, was walking away from her children. Naomi froze. Children? As in plural. Regina nodded. Twins. A boy and a girl. I begged her not to do it. But June was drowning. Their father had disappeared, and she was all alone. She left them at a clinic upstate. Never told anyone who the father was. Not even me. Naomi swallowed hard. Do you know their names? Regina furrowed her brow, trying to recall. Tyrell and Samantha. Yes, that was it. Tyrell and Samantha. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Naomi couldn't breathe. She stared at Regina in stunned silence as the weight of the truth dropped onto her like a ton of bricks. Regina, oblivious to the storm she had just unleashed, continued. I don't even know where they are now. I've never seen them since. Naomi's voice came out hoarse. I know where they are. They're here. In this town. They're my cousins. Regina blinked. What? Naomi rose to her feet, adrenaline rushing through her veins. They're my cousins. No, they're more than that. If what you're saying is true, and June is their mother, then Bill Hamilton, me father, is their father. Regina went pale. Bill Hamilton? That was his name. Naomi nodded. My dad. That means Tyrell and Samantha are my half-siblings. The room fell silent. The old air conditioner buzzed in the background, but Naomi felt like the ground beneath her had vanished. Her world, her identity, her understanding of her family had all shifted in a single moment. The drive to her mother's house was a blur. Naomi clutched the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to calm the thunder inside her chest. Danny Dupree was in the kitchen when Naomi burst through the door. She was stirring tea, humming to herself, but when she saw Naomi's face, the smile dropped. What happened? Danny asked. You need to sit down, Naomi said. Danny did. Naomi dropped the photo and her notes on the table. She walked her mother through the conversation with Regina, the discovery about June, and finally, the connection to Bill. Danny didn't speak for several seconds. She looked at the photo, then back at Naomi. You're telling me June had twins with your father? Naomi nodded. And those twins are Tyrell and Samantha. Danny let out a long, unsteady breath. I don't know what to say. Say something, Naomi pressed. Say this is crazy. That it can't be true. But Danny didn't. She shook her head slowly. No. It's not crazy. It makes sense. Too much sense. Naomi sat down. You knew about June? I didn't know she was June. But your father had a woman in his past. Someone he wouldn't talk about. When I pressed him, he'd shut down. Now it all makes sense. Naomi stared at her. Why didn't you tell me he had secrets like this? Danny looked away. Because I didn't know the whole truth. We were married for 23 years, Naomi. And the man was a stranger to me in so many ways. Naomi processed that in silence. What do we do now? She finally asked. Danny was quiet for a long time. Then she said, we tell them. Naomi flinched. Tyrell and Samantha? Danny nodded. They deserve to know. Even if it blows everything up. Even if they never forgive us. Naomi looked out the window. What if it ruins their lives? Keeping secrets already ruined enough lives, Danny replied softly. The following week, Naomi tracked down Tyrell first. She waited outside his community center, knowing he volunteered there on weekends. When he finally emerged, sweaty and tired, Naomi called out his name. He smiled when he saw her, but it faltered when he caught her expression. You okay? Naomi nodded slowly. Can we talk? They sat on a bench nearby under a tree that swayed lazily in the summer wind. Naomi held the photo in her lap, but didn't show it right away. She started from the beginning her search into June, meeting Regina, discovering the connection. When she finally revealed the truth, Tyrell stared at her, stunned. June is my mother. Naomi nodded. And Bill, my father, is also yours. Tyrell didn't respond. He just sat there, mouth open, eyes locked on the distance. Naomi placed the photo in his hand. That's you, she whispered. And Samantha. Tyrell stood abruptly. I need to go. I know this is a lot, Naomi said quickly. He didn't answer. He walked away. Telling Samantha was even harder. She was more guarded, more emotionally fragile. Naomi approached with care, but the result was the same: disbelief, silence, then retreat. The bomb had been dropped. Now she had to wait for the aftershock. Back at home, Danny began writing a letter. To Bill. Even though he was gone, she needed to put her feelings on paper. She poured out decades of confusion, betrayal, love, and anger. She wrote about Naomi, about June, about the twins. She ended it with a single line: your secrets made strangers out of all of us. The tension in town rose. Whispers began. People who knew June began piecing things together. Smitty and Martin Richardson, who had raised Tyrell and Samantha, demanded answers. Danny and Naomi prepared to meet them, knowing full well it could turn volatile. But they couldn't undo what had been done. They could only move forward through truth. And that truth had just begun to unravel. Naomi didn't sleep for days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the stunned look on Tyrell's face, the way Samantha had recoiled as if the truth itself had burned her. The photo sat on her nightstand, haunting her. She wanted to believe that revealing the truth would heal old wounds, not tear fresh ones open. But things were never that clean. Not in their world. Tyrell eventually responded, but not with words. He showed up at Naomi's apartment one evening, silent, holding the picture in one hand. He sat across from her, leaned forward, and whispered, "She really left us?" Just like that. Naomi hesitated. I don't know the full story yet. But I know she was scared. Alone. She thought she didn't have options. Tyrell shook his head. I had a mother. Her name was Lisa Richardson. She raised me. She loved me. This other woman? I don't know her. But she's part of you, Naomi said softly. Just like my dad is. And that makes us siblings. Half, sure. But still real. He looked up at her. His eyes were different now, not angry, just deeply wounded. I need time. And I need you to stop digging. Please. Samantha, however, took a different path. She confronted June directly. Found her on the edge of town near the soup kitchen where June occasionally volunteered. Samantha walked right up to her, held out the photograph, and said, "Is this you?" June's face crumpled in a second. She didn't even try to lie. Tears welled up immediately. She reached out, but Samantha stepped back. Why? Samantha demanded. Why would you leave us? June opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, because I was afraid. And no one came for me. Not your father, not my family. I was drowning. Your sister came back. She talked to Naomi. She cared. Regina was a child herself back then, June whispered. She couldn't stop me. And I hated myself every day after. Samantha's voice cracked. We grew up thinking we were unwanted. Disposable. Do you know what that does to a person? June reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a locket. Inside were 2 tiny baby photos. I never stopped thinking about you. I just didn't know how to fix it. Samantha took the locket and walked away. Meanwhile, Danny Dupree was preparing for a storm of her own. Word had spread about June's past and the connection to Bill. It didn't take long for old colleagues and mutual acquaintances to start gossiping. Her name became a whispered curiosity in coffee shops and town hall meetings. But Danny didn't hide. She arranged a press interview with a local journalist. She didn't attack Bill. She didn't blame June. She spoke about secrets, about women silenced for decades by shame, abandonment, and social pressure. She used her platform to advocate for transparency and healing. It was bold, controversial, and it struck a nerve. Regina, now living temporarily in Danny's guest room, watched the segment from the couch. She turned to Danny after and said, "Thank you for not turning this into a war." Danny smiled grimly. "This isn't a war. It's a reckoning." Martin Richardson struggled to process the truth. He'd helped raise Tyrell and Samantha, given everything he had to be a good father. Now he had to live with the fact that their biological parents were still alive and deeply tied to a family with its own complicated legacy. He confronted June privately. She braced herself for judgment, but instead Martin asked, "Do you want to be in their lives, or do you just feel guilty?" June paused. "Can it be both?" Martin nodded. "Then start showing up. No more hiding. No more waiting for others to do the work." June agreed. She started attending the family therapy sessions Naomi organized, even though every meeting left her exhausted. She didn't speak much, but her presence said enough. Smitty, on the other hand, wasn't as forgiving. He was fiercely protective of the twins and didn't trust June. But he also trusted Martin, and when Martin vouched for June's sincerity, Smitty backed down, just a little. Naomi continued piecing together more of Bill Hamilton's past. She found receipts, letters, even photos of Bill with June from decades ago. The deeper she dug, the more she realized her father had led a double life. Her grief turned to fury, then to purpose. She created a digital archive documenting everything, a living record of Bill Hamilton, the man, not the myth. It became a passion project, then a podcast. Listeners flooded in. Women who had known Bill called in, sharing their stories. Some were benign, some painful. Naomi didn't censor any of it. She wanted the whole picture, even if it shattered the image she had once clung to. Chelsea Hamilton, Naomi's cousin on her mother's side, reached out. She had heard about everything from mutual friends. Chelsea had her own complicated history with secrets, and she offered to collaborate with Naomi on a new project and outreach initiative for teens in foster care. Naomi agreed. They called it The Unseen. It launched with a town hall event. June spoke at it. So did Samantha. Even Tyrell showed up, standing at the back, listening, absorbing. Regina stayed in town longer than planned. She found part-time work at the local library and began tutoring kids after school. She said she wanted to rebuild what her family had lost. Danny encouraged her. Eventually, the community began to shift. What was once scandal became conversation. Painful truths were no longer whispered, but spoken aloud in shared spaces. People began opening up about their own family secrets. And in the middle of it all, Tyrell and Samantha slowly began to accept their past. Not forgive, not forget, but acknowledge. Samantha started writing poetry again. Tyrell returned to coaching youth basketball, finding peace in mentoring kids the way others had once mentored him. Danny and Naomi started attending mother-daughter therapy. They had always been close, but this had tested them in unimaginable ways. The sessions didn't fix everything, but they created space for honesty. One morning, Naomi woke up to a letter in her mailbox. No return address. Just a handwritten note inside. Thank you for not letting the truth die. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Love, Dad. It was Bill's handwriting. Danny confirmed he had written it months before he passed, but never sent it. Naomi framed the letter. Not because it made things better, but because it reminded her that even silence has roots. And sometimes, the only way to grow past it is to speak loud enough for others to hear. The town would never be the same. Neither would any of them. And maybe that was finally a good thing. Time softened what once felt unbearable. Months passed, then nearly a year. The revelations, though raw and life-altering, had been absorbed into the rhythm of everyday life. Pain, once a constant companion, began to coexist with growth. The past no longer had the final word. It had become context, not a cage. Naomi Hamilton stood on a small stage in the Community Arts Center, speaking to a packed room of young adults and families. It was the one-year anniversary of The Unseen. The program had grown into a statewide initiative. Naomi's voice was steady now, filled with conviction, but behind every sentence was the weight of a story that had nearly broken her. Sometimes the people who raise you are not the ones who gave you life. And sometimes, the people who gave you life aren't ready to be part of yours. But the truth is, both stories matter. They make you who you are. In the front row sat Samantha and Tyrell, shoulder to shoulder, silent but present. It had taken them to Mia long to arrive at that point. For months, they had oscillated between resentment and longing. They had accepted June into their lives slowly, cautiously. June had never demanded to be called Mom. She simply asked to be included, to witness the lives they were building. And eventually, they let her in. Not fully. Not without boundaries. But they let her in. June, sitting a few rows behind them, dabbed her eyes quietly with a tissue. Regina was beside her, holding her hand. The two sisters had rebuilt their bond too, one coffee and conversation at a time. Regina had decided to stay in town permanently, becoming a quiet pillar in the community library and in June's life. Danny Dupree watched from the far side of the room. She was no longer just Naomi's mother. She had become a speaker, a writer, a figure whose own story of betrayal and revelation had empowered countless others to confront their family truths. She had released a memoir titled, What I Didn't Know, and it spent 6 weeks on the regional bestseller list. After the event, Naomi stepped outside for air. The night breeze was warm, and the stars scattered overhead like pieces of unresolved stories. Tyrell joined her a moment later. You did good, he said quietly. She glanced at him. You too. Showing up like this. Letting people see you. He shrugged. Still figuring things out. But it helps. Knowing I don't have to figure it out alone. They stood in silence. Inside, Samantha approached June. It was awkward still, but less sharp. Samantha offered her a copy of her new poetry book, just released. June took it with trembling hands. The dedication read, To the Ghosts Who Became Human Again. Regina found Naomi again before leaving. She hugged her tightly. If your father were here, he'd be proud. Naomi smiled faintly. If he were here, I'd have a few questions. You still can. Write to him. Doesn't matter if he answers. Naomi nodded. Later that night, she sat at her desk and wrote one last entry in her journal. Dear Dad, you were a mystery. A contradiction. You hurt people. You left holes. But I'm choosing not to fill those holes with bitterness. I'm building something instead. From truth. From everything you didn't say. Maybe that's the best any of us can do. Across town, Martin and Smitty cooked dinner together for Tyrell and Samantha. No big speeches, no forced family moments. Just laughter and familiar silence. They knew their roles might change, but their love hadn't. And that was enough. June returned to the women's shelter twice a week now, not out of guilt, but out of purpose. She spoke with mothers on the verge of decisions they couldn't take back. She didn't lecture. She listened. And her story made others feel less alone. In the quiet of a new chapter, Naomi stood before a mirror and saw herself fully. Not just as a daughter or a sister or an advocate, but as someone who had walked through the fire and learned not to be afraid of her reflection. The past had not vanished, but it had evolved. And in its place stood something better. Wholeness.